Welcome everyone to a 1-hour webinar on contract management for field personnel. Each project is different in the way contracts are managed in the field. Sometimes there's a dedicated contract administrator, other times it is the field engineer who has to manage the contract, and still others it is the construction manager or the project manager who has to manage the contract. No matter who is managing the contract, the same contract management activities apply, and the person managing the contract requires knowledge of these activities. This webinar is a brief overview of a 2-day contract management for field personnel workshop that I present. I am an engineer, not a lawyer, so do not take what you hear as legal advice. The information is general in nature and is to give you an understanding of what the contract clauses mean. If you have any concerns about the interpretation of your contract clauses, talk to your procurement group or your company lawyers. This webinar will look at 16 different activities associated with managing a field contract. Each of the 16 activities is important to the whole effort of managing the contract. If you leave one out, the whole management contract effort falls apart. In this webinar, we will touch upon the elements of contract management activities as follows. In Module 1, we will take a look at why ethics is important. In Module 2, we will take a look at what defines a contract. In Module 3, we will identify the components of a contract package. In Module 4, we'll take a look at the rules of conduct for working with your contractor. In Module 5, we'll talk about the fundamentals of contract administration. Module 6, we talk about identify the common causes of claims. Module 7, we take a look at the bid process. In Module 8, we look at the importance of the bid evaluation. In Module 9, we take a look at the necessary documentation requirements and the types. In Module 10, we have the required contractor meetings, which everybody has to have. In Module 11, we look at components of the daily activity reports. In Module 12, we look at the importance of schedules. Module 13, we look at methods of progress monitoring. Module 14, we look at site safety and due diligence. Module 15, we look at the basics of procurement. And in Module 16, we look at the elements of contractor coordination. The person managing the contract goes by many names. In this webinar and in the workshop, I am using field engineer in the combined role of field engineer and contract administrator, as this is the one that I am familiar with. Whomever it is, they are the center of attention on the job site. Here are just some of the business units that you will have to work with on a project. We have to deal with contractors. You have to deal with other type of contract administration personnel. You have to deal with procurement, health, safety, security, and environment. You have to deal with accounting all the time. You're doing construction management. You have to deal with your construction management supervisors, that kind of thing. And you have to deal with project controls people, schedulers, field accountants, this kind of thing. The first module we want to look at is ethics. To the site contractor, the field contract administration personnel are the face of your company. What you do, what you say, and how you act reflects on your company's image to the contractors, the owner, and the outside world. As a field engineer, you have to make decisions every day to act or not to act. These decisions can have an effect on the contractor, the owner, or others. Throughout the project, you will have access to information or knowledge of an important nature. Your position is one of trust, and you will have to ignore pressures and temptations. How these are handled will depend on integrity, good judgment, and character of the field engineer. To put this in perspective, someone has come along and given you millions of dollars to manage for them. Someone has faith and trust in you that you can do that. Everything you do has to be above board. All actions have to be in the best interest of the client. These actions have to be free from any personal gain, prejudice, or influence. In the workshop, we will cover the following ethics issues you have to be aware of. Your reputation, unethical conduct, which includes conflict of interest, betraying a confidence or trust, misrepresentation, misappropriation. We look at unlawful activity and the importance of appearances. The next element we want to cover is contracts. Contracts are a promise the law will enforce. This means the law recognizes the duty to perform the promise and gives a remedy in case of a breach of promise. A contract is an agreement which defines the rights and obligations of the parties involved. A prime contract or a subcontract or an agreement for technical services are often referred to as contracts. A binding contract is formed upon agreement between competent parties or those of capacity on a proper subject matter for a valid consideration. The existence of a contract requires the following factual elements. Requires an offer. Requires an acceptance of that offer, which results in a meeting of the minds, and a promise to perform. It has to be for a valuable consideration, which is usually a form of payment. A time or event when the performance must be made. Terms and conditions for performance, including fulfilling promises and performance itself. And we will look at each of these elements. The purpose of a contract is to establish the agreement between the parties. The parties fix their own terms and limit their own liability. In order for the agreement to be enforceable under the law, the terms and conditions agreed to by the contracting parties are subject to certain requirements and limitations. For the contract to be enforceable, the four requirements of agreement, competent parties on a proper subject matter for a valid consideration have to be in the contract, and we'll take a look at these four elements. We look at competent parties. The first thing you need is a definite promisor and a definite promisee. Each of these has to be legally capable of performing their part in the contract. If someone does not have the legal capacity to take on the obligations of a contract, they cannot be forced or obliged to take on the contract. We have proper subject matter. To be valid, the contract has to have the presence of definite lawful subject matter. A contractual undertaking must have a lawful purpose. The contract can be considered illegal if its formation or its performance is prohibited by statute or its purpose is contrary to common law or public policy. An illegal contract is unenforceable. We have agreement. The contract requires an offer by one party and acceptance by another. There has to be mutual consent by both parties. This mutual consent usually takes place in the written format. The offer has to be clear and complete, and the acceptance cannot modify or compromise the offer. Your bid documents are an offer, and they sometimes come back with qualifications by the contractor. These qualifications have to be addressed and cleared up in order for the offer and acceptance to become legal. If you cannot come to a mutual agreeable terms with the contract, then you have to do something else, like talk to the second bidder or change specifications or rebid, whatever is available to you. We look at the nature of an offer. An offer may be defined as the official indication by one person of his willingness to contract with another under certain specified terms. It is a statement by the offerer of what he would give in return for some desired promise or act on the part of the offeree. The reality of acceptance. You have to be concerned about the reality of the consent involved. There could be cases where the parties concerned may fail to reach an understanding effective at law by reason of misrepresentation, fraud, or malpractice upon one party by the other, so that the contractor or the contract as signed represents an entirely different agreement and an entirely different course of action from that which was really intended. If this happens, there can be no mutual agreement. There are a variety of reasons for which one party may legally breach a contract. Some of these are fraudulent terms and conditions that are intended to deceive. You have intended concealment or disclosure or non-disclosure of a pertinent material fact. A significant misstatement of fact. You have silence regarding the duty to disclose a false statement pertinent to the contract. Substantially changing one's position in reliance upon a false statement. A mistake or state of mind that is not in accord with the facts. And entering into a contract under duress or undue influence. We have consideration. Consideration means something of value received by or given at the request of the promiser in reliance upon an exchange for his promise. This is what each party receives and gives up in the agreement, such as payment for services. Another requirement of consideration is that every enforceable promise must be supported by a consideration. As well, the consideration must be accepted by both contracting parties as a consideration of the contract. Typically, when the owner issues a contract, the consideration is money. Consideration must be lawful, definite, and certain. If the consideration is vague, then it cannot be enforced. The next element we're going to take a look at is what is in the contract package. A lot of information goes into a contract package, and it is broken out into several distinct sections. We will take a look at each of these sections. The first one is the general conditions. The general conditions spell out the legal rights, responsibilities, and relationships of all parties to the contract. These points are all gathered in one location so that they do not have to be repeated in all the different contracts that you may issue. We have special conditions. While general conditions apply to every pre-printed contract, special conditions do not. Since every site is different, the special conditions could outline what services, materials, and equipment the owner would provide. We have the pricing and proposal information. This section contains information we require the bidder to provide with his proposal. The most important part is the breakdown of the quantities and his pricing. This eventually will be the agreed upon payment for the contract. We also need to be aware of any exceptions taken by the bidder. These all have to be resolved before the contract can be written. And we have the technical specifications. This section usually provides the design criteria, material, quality, and scope of work. This section may also include the plant design conditions and standard component list. We have the drawings. And the drawings and the technical specification are the main controlling elements of the contract. The drawings show what has to be built, and the specifications control the workmanship and quality. And we also have amendments. Contracts typically have to be modified or changes made as the work progresses. These changes could be change orders, contract changes, amendments, or various other terms. The material in this section on contractor relations covers not just the field engineer, but applies to all people on site who have to interface with contractors. We will look at issues all team members have to be aware of, such as responsibility and authority. The field engineer is responsible for assuring the contractor's work is in conformance with the provisions of the contract. The field engineers have no authority to allow deviations from the essential contract requirements. The field engineer has no authority to instruct the contractor on how to do the work or the methods of construction. The only time he can step in is if the work is unsafe. And we need a proper attitude. In order to work with a contractor, you need the right attitude. It all comes down to the personalities of the people involved. We need proper relations. The field staff should practice the following rules of conduct. You need to be a diplomat. Speaking softly is a lot better than yelling. Do not be overly friendly. You need a clear conscience to make the tough decisions. You need to think ahead. Decisions made today could affect something in the future. You have to anticipate problems that may be coming along. And you have to be fair and reasonable. Do not make the contractor do more than what is called for in the contract. And do not be rushed. Decisions made in haste are going to be bad decisions. And you have to be firm. Right? Make a decision, don't dither. The next element of contract management we discuss are the fundamentals of contract administration. When we administer the contract, we are making sure that the work is performed as intended in the contract, and the provisions of the contract are met by both parties. With contract administration, we track and document all contract activities from project inception to final completion. We want to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. Some of the fundamentals covered include: read the contract. You have to be familiar with the contracts you have to deal with and manage. You need to be prepared to answer any questions that come up about the contract. You should not be at a meeting saying you don't know the answer. Reach a clear understanding with the contractor. When you start the project, you should reach a clear understanding with the contractor as to what you expect from him in the way of performance, quality, schedule, and cooperation. Maintain a proper attitude towards a contractor. Like you, contractors are in the business of making money. They want to get the job done within budget, on time, and leaving a quality product. They do not come on board to take advantage of other contractors or the owner. As a contract administrator, you have to realize this and have the proper attitude when dealing with the contractors. We discuss problems. One of the things you should always keep in mind is that people don't like surprises. You don't like surprises, and your supervisor does not like surprises. If you have a problem that you can't seem to resolve, or you see problems coming your way, you should discuss them with your supervisor. Do not work in a vacuum. You monitor the contractor. You should be working with the contractor to continually monitor his performance and progress. Your monitoring should be an effort to aid the contractor in the performance of his work. This is not to use against them, as you are both part of the team. We are talking about monitoring and not supervise. You do not want to get into the position where you are assuming liability for errors and omissions in the work. You have to notify the contractor. You should notify the contractor in writing at the earliest possible moment of any serious concerns you may have as it relates to performance or lack thereof. You always have to be cognizant of any potential impact that lack of performance will have. You have to fulfill your obligations. Just as you expect the contractor to fulfill his obligations of the contract, you also have to fulfill your obligations of the contract. These obligations to scope and commitments are detailed in the performed or conformed contract. You should not expect the contractor to perform work that is outside of the written agreement without being paid or compensated for the work. These are just some of the fundamentals you have to be aware of. Common causes of claims is the next element we will cover in the workshop. Some of these causes are changes due to differing conditions, and this typically applies to subsurface conditions. We have changes ordered by the owner or the construction manager. The owner may alter, add, or deduct from the work during the progress of construction, and this entitles the contractor to claim extra compensation on the lump sum job. We will talk about the problem with unit prices. You have reduction of work. We will look at the contractor's quantity curves and how they affect the cost of the reduction. You have increased difficulty of performance. This comes about because of unanticipated difficulties which interfere with the performance and could be a cause for the contractor to claim an extra. And we have delay, disruption, and interference. Time is money. Delays cost money, and delay is generally acknowledged to be the most common and costly problem encountered on construction projects. Within delay, disruption, and interference, we will discuss the three broad categories of delays. They are non-excusable delays. There is excusable delays, but no compensation, just a time delay only. And we have compensable delays. So non-excusable delays are delays that are under the control of the contractor. They could have been foreseen and avoided by due care of the contractor. They are the contractor's responsibility, and no time extensions are allowed. We have excusable delays, which has two categories, being delays giving rise to adjustments in schedule and delays justifying compensation. Delays giving rise to adjustments in schedule but no compensation. When a delay is caused by factors that are not foreseeable and beyond the contractor's reasonable control, but is not caused by the owner's breach of contractual obligations, it is excusable. This term has an implied meaning that neither party is at fault under the terms of this contract. The contractor will not receive compensation for the cost of the delay, but he will be entitled to additional time to complete his work. Force majeure is considered as excusable delay in this clause. And then we have delays justifying compensation or compensable delays. These are delays, suspensions, or interruptions to all or part of the contract by an act or failure to act by the owner. Or the delay is compensable if it results from the owner's breach of the obligations stated or implied in the construction contract. Other problems we will discuss in the workshop include suspension of work, concurrent delays, breach of implied warranty, the ripple effect of a change order. There are 16 possible effects you need to be aware of. You have constructive acceleration, and we have notice of delay. To finish off the module, we will look at breach of contract and what it implies, the various elements of termination, and operation of law, which deals with bankruptcy. The next module is the bid process. In order to lessen your problems in the field, you should understand what transpires in the office when it comes to proposals. You should provide the field input into the proposals and understand what was being asked for. So, what is a request for a proposal, or RFP? It is a type of bid document used to solicit proposals from prospective contractors for products or services. It is used when items or services are of a complex nature and assumes that negotiation will take place between the buyer and the contractor. You use it when you want both competition and creative input from the market, and it details what and why, but not how. That is up to the vendor. Another term you hear is request for quotation, or RFQ. It is similar to request for proposal, but generally with a lower monetary amount involved in the procurement. It is used to solicit proposals from prospective contractors for standard products or services, such that negotiations may not be required. So when do we use an RFP? You use it when you have a problem or situation where you don't know the best solution, or you want to evaluate factors other than price when selecting a contractor, or you want to see what the experts propose, or you want to understand best practices in the area, and you would like ideas on how to deliver a new program, service, or approach in business. Following are some of the problems with an RFP. You are looking for proposed solutions, not something that fits a preconceived agenda. If the mandatory requirements are not met, then they are disqualified. So if I ask for red widgets and they're proposing blue widgets, that does not meet the mandatory requirements and can be rejected. You should advise them how the bidders will be evaluated, especially if you're using weighted criteria. This will give you the best price. You need negotiation skills, otherwise you could lose. And you need to make sure your reject clause is legal. Is it worded correctly? See the company lawyers before you invoke this clause. We can have RFPs for various items. We have alliance contracts. Most owners have an alliance contract with a pump or motor vendor. We can have erect-only RFPs where the owner buys the equipment and the contractor installs it. We can have a supply and erect RFP, like this example of a pre-engineered building. And we can also have an RFP for a piece of equipment. On a typical complex project, you may have all of these RFPs that you need to deal with. These different RFPs break down into two different types of RFPs that you need to be aware of. They are ones where there is no on-site manpower being provided. This typically applies to equipment the owner purchases. The second one involves the contractor bringing manpower on site. This includes the supply and erect of or design buildings or erection of the owner's equipment mentioned above. The RFP documents are different for each of these. In the workshop, we will look at some of the standard documents that are important to the bid package, they being the site design and standard component list. We have the vendor data requirements. We have the vendor information requirements, and we will review a complete tender document in the workshop. Bid evaluation and all that it involves is the next important module to be looked at. If the bidder is coming on site, the field needs input into the evaluation. There is the bidder pre-qualification, as you do not want a contractor on your site whom you do not want to deal with or who is unsafe. You will have to attend the site bid meetings, and we will talk about what has to be covered in the meetings. In the bid analysis, the field issues have to be addressed by the field, not the design office or procurement. There are a lot of field issues that you need to be aware of and addressed, as you do not want any surprises when the contractor shows up in the field. There are several things you need to be aware of and watch out for. The first thing we want to look at is how our contractors are selected. In the majority of cases, contracts are done through competitive bidding. Competitive bidding is used as it encourages the lowest possible good price with the highest technical standards. It creates optimal productivity and technological improvement. It offers broad opportunity to the industrial marketplace. The goal of bid evaluation is to find the most responsive bidder from the quality, technical, commercial, schedule, and cost standpoints. Bids received will typically come with exceptions to some of the general or special conditions, pricing and payments, materials, procedures, or methods to be used. Each of these exceptions has to be looked at from the standpoint of how it affects the contract. A lot of effort and thought went into developing the bid documents, so you do not want to be hasty in making any changes. There is nothing wrong in saying no. To do the bid evaluation, you have to involve the same disciplines that prepared the original bid document. The bids have to be reviewed and conditioned. Some of the elements of the bid are what we have asked for, while others are not. Those items that are not compatible have to be looked at and evaluated. Once all the bids are conditioned, we can then consider other factors in the evaluation. On large jobs, the conditioning can take a lot of work. If you have more than 3 bidders, this can be a time-consuming effort. Price is only one component of the bid evaluation. We need to determine which bidder has the capability of performing the work, complied with the specifications or are in compliance, provides a schedule that meets or is close to the owner's schedule, has an acceptable price. In the workshop, we will discuss other material to watch out for in the proposal, such as required information in the bid documents, a general look at the proposal, disciplines involved, front-end loading of the bid, are bids too high, are bids too low. Documentation is very important to the administration of contracts. One never knows when a lawsuit or claim will come about. You will need documentation of various types to prove your case. When it comes to documentation and lawsuits, there are a couple of sayings, being the one with the most information wins, and the assumption is the other side will not be able to prove anything. This is why documentation is important. You want to have the most information and you want to be able to prove your case. Therefore, you need to maintain complete, accurate, and well-organized documentation based on fact. If you do not have sufficient information, you will have trouble with claims or lawsuits. You can have all the information, however, if it is filed in a poor system, you may not be able to find what you need. Project documentation is electronic and filed online. Make sure you follow your company procedures when it comes to storing project documentation. You need to keep all the documentation on the company's servers and not on your hard drive. The filing system should be organized in such a manner that you can find what you need. Make sure you are consistent in how you file information so it doesn't get lost. Documents come in many forms, and at the end of the day, they are all important in case you have to defend against a claim. Some of the different types of documentation you will see on a project include correspondence. Since all communication with your subcontractors has to be in writing, correspondence is the most important element of documentation you have. The correspondence, whether hard copy or electronic, has 2 purposes. It is there to transmit information and provide documentation. With emails, it is so easy to get into trouble. You should never forward emails without editing them. Most people don't read the threads and could be passing on derogatory or information that could make you lose a lawsuit. Emails are useful for general conversations, to sort out agreements, gather information, etc. When it comes to changes to contracts, you will need a hard copy, signed document. Email will not do it. Different jurisdictions allow for hard copy documents to be scanned and the hard copy shredded. Check your company policy on this. Your email should be saved on a company server, and there should be a company policy on what emails to archive. With emails, it is so easy to type out an email and hit send. However, just because you have sent an email does not mean the ball is in the other person's court. You know what it's like yourself. You go through your emails and determine which ones you will answer today and maybe get around to the others. If you send an email and you want a response, you should phone the recipient and tell him to look for your email and give you a response to it. Other items looked at in the workshop include correspondence logs, meeting minutes, daily reports, proposals, amendments, and memorandum to file. Meetings are important to the overall contract management process. On a project, in the office or in the field, you should start every meeting with a safety moment. In the field, if you are running the meetings, that means you have to come up with a safety topic. The safety moment could be on anything that is current, like watch out for deer on the roads during deer season. If you are in doubt as to what to talk about, there are web pages you can go to get topics for safety meetings. The contractor's crews should be having toolbox safety meetings, and you need to do meeting safety moments as well. This is very important to the overall management of the project. Do not neglect this. For a field engineer, a formal meeting is a very useful means of communicating with the other parties. Properly run meetings have the following advantages. They are the fastest way of passing information to a group of people. It helps assure that everyone understands equally the information that has been presented. Provides immediate reaction and provides on-the-spot discussion and agreement of contentious issues and resolution of problems. Puts contentious issues on the table, which can help to relieve the tension, and allows the expertise of the attendees to provide input on issues discussed. Meetings are held for various reasons throughout the life of the project and contracts. As a field engineer, you will get more out of the meetings if you follow the basic principles for effective meetings, which we will discuss in the workshop, such as meeting preparation. You need to know who has to be at the meeting. One big problem is not having the right people there, or important people are not available and there is no alternative representation. Meeting location. On new sites, it is important to know what is happening around any location you use for meetings. You don't want to be having a meeting in a room where there's a jackhammer working on the other side of the wall. You have the meeting room arrangement. The person running the meeting should be visible to everyone in attendance. We conduct the meetings. You start the meetings on time. On site, space is at a premium and you will have to end on time, so you should start on time. Interruptions. Everyone has a say, but don't let them drag on. Your time is limited and important. And we have closing the meeting. Always go around the table to ask everyone if they have anything else they want to say. We will also discuss the 4 standard site meetings, and these are the pre-bid meeting with the site tour, we have pre-award meetings, we have pre-construction kickoff meetings, and we have scheduled progress meetings. Assembling and filing reports is everybody's favorite thing to do. Unfortunately, they are a necessary evil and should not be overlooked in their importance. Every company has a selection of reports they need filled in, and in some cases you may wonder about the need. Reports in their own way are important to the management of contracts and should be looked at as such. Your contract should list what reports the contractors are to provide to you. As a field engineer, you will need to make sure you get these reports. All required reports should have been listed in the bid documents. If you ask for additional reports after the contract is signed, it will cost you, so get it right during the bid phase. For the field engineer, the most important reports are the daily activity reports. These are standard on all field jobs. Since they could be used as part of a claim, they are the only ones discussed in this section. There are also management reports and historical information reports you complete, but they are particular to your company and will not be discussed. With electronic reports, it is ideal if you can cut and paste between the various reports to save time with repetitive information. These daily activity reports have a legal significance and can be subpoenaed in the case of a lawsuit. Because of this, the report must be completed in a careful, timely manner. They must be factual, unbiased, and complete in all respects. When filling them in, you have to keep in mind these reports may be important in protecting the owner's interest in the case of a claim or a lawsuit. The activity reports have many uses and certain requirements. The content is standard with the aim of being able to refute any claims. Some of the uses of the daily activity reports are in-house communication. Since it is a complete record of the daily activities of the contractor, it provides a convenient method of informing construction site supervisor personnel, owner's personnel, and others. The reports should provide current ongoing information on problems, inspections, instructions given, delays, conflicts, safety, etc. It is a permanent official record. It is an important historical, permanent record of the day-to-day activities of each contractor and all matters affecting the contract. It should be written in a manner so it can be used later on as a basic reference to determine what had transpired and the circumstances at any given point in time. In the event of a claim or dispute, you need to understand what you wrote, so it is important the reports be written correctly, clearly, and concisely. The activity reports also have certain requirements which will be discussed in the workshop. Managing schedule performance is important to the overall project success. A lot of field experience will help you develop the necessary skills for the management of schedule performance. If you are new to field engineering, you should make the effort to learn about schedules, analysis of schedules, and the management of schedules. Typically, in the field, there is a scheduler who knows how to run and manage a schedule program. Your job is to provide the required input. You should understand how the information is inputted into the program and what the various terms mean. You should have a pretty good idea of construction progress, problems that require the schedule to be adjusted and by how much, construction logic, and contractor interrelationships. There are 4 levels of schedule detail that you will hear about. They are levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they come from the American Association of Cost Engineers, or AACE. Here is the detail that level 1 and 2 contain. Level 1 is just a milestone schedule. This is what we would typically see at the early stages of a project. This is also what you would find in your funding documents. As the project progresses along the project life cycle, more detail is added, which gives us a level 2 schedule. The logic ties could come from the project manager, project engineers, or the scheduler, depending on the experience levels. Here is what a level 3 schedule looks like. For the funding documents, we would typically have a version of level 3. We would have the critical path figured out. And here's what a level 4 looks like. There's more detail than you would get out of the design office. It would be produced by a contractor. Your general conditions may call up which level of schedule detail is required, and other times it is hinted at. You may also end up with a schedule that is a mixture of levels 3 and 4. It is usually up to the contractor to provide a schedule suitable for the work being done. A schedule ensures the timely completion of the project. If you don't have a schedule, how will you know when you're finished? It lays out what has to occur, when, and when the project is to be completed. Using a work breakdown structure, we can define the activities in the packages which will be required to produce the project deliverables. Without the work breakdown structure, you would be lost. Think of an airplane. How could you design and build it if you don't have a work breakdown structure where you get more manageable components? As well, we have to sequence the activities in the work packages and determine the duration of these activities. When you're in the field, you need to take advantage of every opportunity to observe and learn how things are done, the sequence and how they are assembled, and how long it takes to do the tasks. All projects are subject to change, so schedules are not static. As events unfold, they require the schedule to change. As an example, a delay in equipment delivery could result in a schedule change. There are several component parts to a project that need to be controlled in order for the schedule to be controlled. Some of these parts include design drawings, equipment procurement, material and equipment deliveries, subcontractor performance, etc. Slippage in any of the above components could have a far-reaching effects on the project itself. Slippage could result in additional costs, late startup, loss of revenue, and impact on commercial contracts. Schedule slippage for any of the above reasons could result in a delay claim. On any job site, there could be several contractors or subcontractors that need to be managed and coordinated. As a field engineer, the work has to be coordinated as only so many people can fit into one spot, and the work that proceeds has to be completed on schedule. It is up to the construction management group to manage the schedule so the work moves along at a steady pace without delay claims. One requirement for contractors on site should be the use of the same scheduling program. You may also want to hire a scheduler who incorporates all of the subcontractor schedules into one document. This way, you can review one schedule and see all the interrelationships between the various subcontractors. This helps immensely in your schedule management. The approved contractor schedule is not part of the signed contract. However, it is still legally as important as other parts of the contract. Some points include: if your contract specifies the need for a schedule, all parties are legally bound to the resulting schedule. In order for the contractor performing the work to meet the requirements of this schedule, you have to be able to show the contractor agreed to and approved the schedule. This cannot be a one-sided affair. There has to be an agreement by both parties. As well, all copies of the schedules, approved or not approved, should be kept so a case can be built later on, if required, to refute any claim. Since the contractor is required to prepare the schedule, he is obligated to the owner to implement it according to the terms. The schedule lays out the mutual obligations of the parties, such that they shall not be hindered or delayed or disrupt the other party. Approval of the contractor's schedule means the owner agrees that the schedule is reasonable. The owner is bound by the schedule and is expected to meet its obligations, or his obligations. The owner must provide the contractor with equipment, drawings, etc. to meet the contractor's schedule. And the schedule defines reasonable time to which any action must perform. The owner has obligations to the contractor in order for the contractor to meet the schedule. Some ways the owner could delay, hinder, or interfere are: fails to ensure the preceding work is completed in the proper time frame, fails to approve required shop or production drawings within a reasonable time frame, supplies erroneous information which could mislead or disrupt the contractor in his performance, fails to disclose information for satisfactory performance, fails to provide timely inspection of completed work, orders the contractor to proceed with work under conditions that affects his satisfactory performance, and assumes direction and execution of field work that is the responsibility of the contractor. These are just some of the ways the owner could delay, hinder, or interfere. There are more discussed in the workshop. It is up to the field engineer to control the schedule. It is up to you to get the information the contractor requires. Progress monitoring is very important to the overall project success. Progress monitoring typically refers to the schedule. However, with projects we talk about cost control, which includes schedules. Cost control is a misnomer as we are not controlling costs. We are talking about measuring progress. To manage your contracts, you have to know the progress. You cannot do anything about the money that has been spent or the time that has passed. All you can control is what is left. And to control that, you have to know what the progress is. Every day you have to make decisions and manage trade-offs. And you can only do this if you understand where you are in the project. How much money is left? How much time is left? This general condition tells the contractor when you need the schedule after contract award. Now 14 days or 2 weeks is fairly typical, and you will have a similar clause. This general condition states that the progress will be measured weekly and the contractor has to pick up any slippage on his dime. You will also have a similar clause. From these two general condition sections, for you to ensure the contractor is performing adequately, you have to measure his schedule progress. How do you determine when the contractor's actual progress does not meet the requirements of the contract? Well, first you need an approved schedule that meets the contractor's and owner's needs. This general condition clause 48.5 outlines the schedule requirements. Note that it does not call up a level of schedule. Here's what the contract says about how the contractor's schedule is to be prepared. It lays out information the contractor is to include. The milestones are the ones set out in the contract documents and come from the engineering group or the owner. We also want a resource-loaded schedule, and that schedule has to be coded to design services that the contractor is going to provide. The project work breakdown structure, which is provided by the owner or the construction manager. It should be coded to discipline, earthwork, civil, structural, whatever you're using. Also construction work packages, okay, again provided or approved by the owner or the construction manager. And responsibility, who's responsible for doing the work. With information from the contractor, you can see if the contractor is on track or not, and the trending direction of the contract. From the information, you will need to determine if corrective action is required or not. The tools typically used to monitor and evaluate the contractor's progress are as follows. We have cash flow. We have manpower resource curves. We have material resource curves. We have earned value analysis. We have critical path method monitoring. We have equipment and material deliveries and installation. And we do some type of trend forecasting. These depend on getting the general conditions asking for the information and the information received from the contractor being accurate. It also depends on how dedicated you are to obtaining compliance with the specified requirements. For lump sum contracts, the progress payment breakdown is an additional source of information for progress analysis. The field engineer should look at the breakdown carefully. The breakdown should consist of readily measurable elements and broken down sufficiently for tracking purposes. The breakdown should serve the dual purpose of progress payments and progress monitoring. We use S-curves for progress monitoring. For the manpower and material resource curves, there are 3 curves we need to develop. We'll talk about them below. They are the baseline S-curve. This is the plan or the schedule the contractor submits before commencement, either with or shortly thereafter, with their proposal outlining the proposed allocation of resources and the timing of tasks necessary to complete the project within a set time frame and budget. From this data, the baseline S-curve is developed. We have the target S-curve. Once the project gets going, they are subject to change, and this will be reflected in the production schedule and target S-curve. And then we have the actual S-curve. As the project progresses, the production schedule is updated on a regular basis with revisions to the percent complete for each task. The actual S-curve is generated from this information. When we add cost to the S-curves, we get earned value analysis, or EVA, which is the most common method of measuring project progress. It is a project management control tool defined as an objective measure of the value of work performed expressed in terms of the budget planned for the work. In other words, what you got for what you spent. It works in the design office as well as in the field. For this method, several requirements have to be met. The scope has to be 100% defined and frozen. There can be no gray areas at all. If there are options on what has to be done, you pick an option and you go with it. The scope has to be broken down into the work package level. You need a project baseline tied to the contractor's proposed cost and schedule or time frame. All changes have to be controlled. No scope creep. Use change orders for scope change to change the baseline. Actual costs reported have to be current. This means you should be collecting committed costs and using them. Actuals take too long to come through the system, and by the time you get them, the project is out of control. This is just an example of an S-curve and the quadrants. We have a planned curve, which is the cumulative spending curve, or how we plan to spend the funding. To this, we compare the actual cost and the earned value. And you can see these three curves in this S-curve graph on the right. Along with the S-curve, we have the four quadrants that show up on the left. In the chart, we plot the cost performance index and the schedule performance index. The center of this chart is 1, 1. It's not 0, 0. If you plot a point in the top right quadrant, the project is ahead of schedule and under budget. The bottom right quadrant is over budget, ahead of schedule. The lower left is over budget and behind schedule. The upper left is under budget, behind schedule. So with earned value analysis, you only need to look at the curves and which quadrant you're in to determine the status of the project. This type of progress monitoring is used by many corporations to review project status. If you have hundreds of projects, it provides a simple way of reviewing all the projects in a rapid fashion. Progress monitoring is a large subject area, and this webinar does not offer enough time to cover it in detail. The workshop goes into greater detail in the S-curve and earned value analysis. Safety on the job is everyone's responsibility. The root cause of the majority of safety-related losses is the absence of a systematic process to identify and mitigate workplace hazards and unsafe work practices. Management has to have a safety attitude. If management does not have a safety attitude, then the workers won't have one either. Contractors or owners who involve contractors and their workforces in the safety process will be more successful. Hopefully, during the design phase, contractor input was sought to make sure it is safe to build, and it can be built. This is very important because you don't want to get into the field to find out that the design is unsafe. A safety program must be documented. You cannot have a safety program based on verbal instructions. The successful safety program must address site-specific hazards and safety concerns, as well as provide direction to ensure compliance with federal, provincial, or state and local safety regulations and standards. The safety program requirements will be different for each project. As an example, buried utilities will have different safety issues than working at heights. Whatever you do, you want to keep records relating to safety issues. So what is the difference between a safety policy and a safety program? The health and safety policy is a written statement by an employer's commitment to protect the health and safety of employees at work. This is a policy that is signed by the highest officer in the company. The health and safety program is the standards and procedures used to implement the health and safety policy. Every company's program is unique and should reflect the hazards at the worksite. You, working for a contractor, have to understand what the safety program entails because you have to ensure your own people are following the program and any subcontractors you hire are also following the program. This is a typical safety clause in the general conditions. It is your company's policy to construct every facility in a safe manner. Construction is high hazard and is subject to accidents, therefore safety is very important. A typical clause covers all the actions required by the contractor to protect all the personnel and property while on the contractor's site. It is important for the field engineer, plus other field staff, to avoid any actions that could allow the contractor to transfer the safety responsibilities and liability to your company or the owner. On a construction site, the following people are involved in site safety. You have the site safety supervisor. This position is part of the construction management company. He is responsible for developing the project safety program and is responsible to the construction manager for site safety. You have the field engineer. He is responsible for administrating the safety practices of the contractor and subcontractors. He has to work with the site safety supervisor, keeping him abreast of issues and seek his guidance on matters of safety. The field engineer should not be handling safety issues as it could have disastrous effects for his company. You have the contractor's site safety representative. He is responsible for communication and action on behalf of the contractor. He is the contact for all safety issues. And then we have the contractor's site superintendent. He is responsible for the site, determines what actions are required, and getting them done. You or your employer and the owner will have to do your due diligence when it comes to safety. So what is due diligence? Well, due diligence is demonstrated by your actions before an incident occurs, not after the fact. Due diligence is the level of judgment, care, prudence, determination, and activity that a person would reasonably be expected to do under particular circumstances. Failure to prove that you have been duly diligent in complying with occupational health and safety legislation could result in significant penalties. Your lawyer would have to show that the event was so unlikely that you or a group of your peers would never have expected it to occur. Your lawyer would have to show that you did everything reasonable to prevent the incident. And due diligence is as much a culture and a way of doing business as it is a legal defense. There is a cost associated with workplace illness and injuries. Just think of yourself. If you get injured on the job and it results in a lost time injury or death, what happens? We will discuss these costs in the workshop. Also in the workshop is a section on hazards. If proper attention is not paid to hazards during the design, these hazards can show up during the construction. The problem is to anticipate the hazards and then take action to prevent injury and illness in people or to control property losses. With hazard recognition, we want to recognize, assess, and control the hazards. We will close out this module by looking at hazard assessment and the hierarchy of control for hazards. The next module we look at is procurement. Even during construction, things have to be purchased and purchase orders revised. Sometimes it is up to the field engineer to manage the procurement process on site through the site procurement group, and other times the problem may have to go back to the engineering office for resolution and procurement. Either way, there are several things discussed in the workshop you have to know and understand as they could affect your contractor's schedule. There are different approaches to purchasing works, goods, and services, and you need to know what they are. You have to understand what the procurement process is for your project. Every project is different, and you have to do some basic research to understand what takes place. What type of documentation is required? Who signs what? Where are these people located? You have to know how long it takes to procure something. You need to know how long it takes from the time a data sheet is given to the procurement group to the time an order is placed. You may have to expedite the paperwork to prevent any delay claims from your contractor. And of course, the dollar value of the item to be procured will affect the length of time required to procure the item. A big aspect of procurement is how much risk do you pass on. If you want to dig a hole, you need to decide if the price from the contractor is to include water in the hole or not. If you have the contractor assume there is water, you will get a high price, as he may have to pump the water. If you assume there is no water and will give the contractor a change order to pump water if he finds any, then you will get a lower price. So basically, the more risk you pass, the higher the price. When procuring goods, you have two choices. You can buy tried and true, or you can buy something that is new on the markets. When buying goods, you have to keep in mind that you are controlling the owner's future costs by buying what is proven. If you buy new, you may have to replace before the end of the asset's life. As a site person, you need to understand what demurrage is and what the freight terms mean. All the freight terms come from Incoterms 2010, which is the latest edition. In order to keep your costs and cost forecasting under control, you need to know how the equipment is being shipped, what your responsibilities are before it gets on site, and your responsibilities when it arrives on site. You are basically renting the transport vehicle, so you cannot have a large piece of equipment, like this one shown here, unexpectedly show up on your job site at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon with no one available to unload it. You're the one who has to organize it and make sure the transport vehicle is released in the required time frame. One misunderstanding can cost the project thousands of dollars with no recourse. The most common freight terms discussed in the workshop are Ex-Works, which is EXW. We have FOB, which is free on board. We have FCA, which is free carrier. We have DDP, which is delivered duty paid. And we have DDU, which is delivered duty unpaid. On all projects, there are what I like to call hidden contracts. These are contracts the owner has that are not readily apparent until you go to do a particular task, and all of a sudden you're delayed and there's a cost to do it. There are 3 hidden contracts you have to watch out for and make sure they are handled well in advance. Anytime you have to tie into a utility, there's a cost and schedule issue. We have the demurrage costs mentioned above, and there are the permits required for the project. This could include the owner's work permit system that you have on site. Some of these permit requirements are easy peasy and others are onerous. The last module we'll look at is interface coordination. The field engineer's primary responsibility is to see that the contractor performs as intended by the contract agreement. On a job site, there could be a number of field engineers, each managing different contractors. These field engineers are not each man for himself, but have to coordinate with each other to get the project completed. This position is a team effort that spans across the different groups within the organization. The field engineer is the construction manager's representative to the assigned contractor. All official contact with the contractor should go through the field engineer. This single point of contact avoids confusion and places responsibility for the contract with the field engineer. This position covers a lot of activities, with coordination being involved in most of them. It is not just coordinating between contractors and the construction group, but also involves coordination with head office support groups such as procurement and engineering, as well as site tests and inspection. If you are managing a contract, you should be thoroughly familiar with the contract before work begins. It is advantageous if you are involved in the following events: the project team reviews of the bid package, the pre-bid meeting on site, the pre-award meetings. If you can't attend the meetings, you should read the minutes of the meetings. Before the contractors can start on site, or other events can take place, there needs to be a pre-construction kickoff meeting. Notice of site mobilization. You are the person who determines when the contractor can come on site. Before bringing the contractor on site, you should look at, is the contractor being mobilized too early? Are there areas where the contractor can start work? If a contractor has put up his supporting facilities, is there enough time to do this? Is fabrication on schedule? Will the contractor have enough material on site to support any work activity? Is the work of others available to the contractor? This includes materials, facilities, and equipment. For construction management, the field engineer is the key person for the coordination and control of the contractor. The construction manager must be aware of all problems, any potential problems, contract status, and progress of his contracts. He gets this information from daily contact with his field engineers, the review of daily reports, and monitoring what is going on the job site. The field engineer is required to interface with numerous business groups in the performance of his work throughout the life of the project. The field engineer is responsible to coordinate the contractor's construction efforts with other contractors, the construction manager, or the owner. He has to ensure that the contractor conducts his operations so as to cooperate with others working in his vicinity and avoid interferences with their work. You can only fit so many workers into an area, and work has to be prioritized. The field engineer has to be involved in the prioritization. Other items looked at in the workshop are planning, mediating, interferences, schedule coordination, procurement coordination, cleanup and housekeeping, contractor and subcontractor meetings, and requirements for contract completion. So this is just an overview of what is covered in my 2-day contract management for field personnel workshop. There's an online version you can get at learn.genexus.com. If you're looking for an outline of the workshop, you can go to this one at training@procept.com. And if you want us to come out and do a live workshop for you, and if you were checking for live workshops that we're doing for the public, you can get in touch with sales@procept.com or myself at bmoj@bmoj.com. Thank you for listening.